Hey there, Nation, and welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Cheapskate, and we are back with an episode of Way of the Underhive. This is a series that is dedicated to brand new players in Necromunda, build their starting rosters, and learn more about the game mechanics of their favorite gangs. On this episode, we will discuss House Orlock, but this time around, instead of discussing how they be used inside of an Underhive campaign back in Hive Primus, we're taking a look at the House Orlock gangs and how they operate within the confines of the Ash Wastes. Now that Games Workshop has dropped the Ash Waste expansion for games of Necromunda, and Ash Waste campaigns becoming more and more prevalent on the gaming scene, we're going to talk about exactly how House Orlock kind of fits in that new campaign system. We'll talk about their strengths, their weaknesses, their fighters, their play styles within that setting, and at the same time provide you with 3 starting rosters that you can use to start up your own campaigns in the Ash Waste using House Orlock. So with that being said, let's get this video on a roll. So first of all, let's go and talk about the strengths of a House Orlock gang. Now, one of the nice things about a House Orlock gang is that House Orlock gangs are jacks of all trades. They're extremely versatile. You name it, they can pretty much do it pretty well within the aspect of a campaign. And the reason why that is the case is because they have some pretty decent stats. They have excellent access to certain skills that can help them out as well. They also have much more, probably most importantly of all, they have access to excellent equipment. Their equipment, the weapons, the war gear they can take is really, really powerful, and they can really help you out and give you a good edge over your opponents in a campaign, the Ash Wastes. At the same time, they also have very powerful leaders with their road captains. At the same time, their champions are also excellent as well, and they also have really good prospects in the form of the Wreckers. And we'll talk about those fighters a little bit more in detail when we go on later on in the video. At the same time, this is the only gang so far in the Ash Waste setting that has a specific crew options that they use to operate their vehicles. And at the same time, they also have their own tactics cards for vehicles, as well as House Orlock specific tactics to be used in the Ash Wastes. And the reason why that is the case is because of the narrative background of the House Orlock. According to the narrative and lore of Necromunda, House Orlock controls the highways and byways of the Ash Wastes that link up the different hives, and their job is to patrol those roads and also make sure that business flows and commerce continues on those highways. And that's the reason why House Orlock has such an edge in the House and Ash Waste campaign thus far. I do suspect that later editions of materials coming out for Necromunda will give the other houses in Necromunda ability to use various tactics as well as vehicles and such in the Ash Waste. But for now though, House Orlock is the only game in town when it comes to the starting gangs for the campaign. Now, while House Orlock does have a lot of strengths going for it, they do have a couple of weaknesses. Like I said before, so since they are very versatile, what that does mean though that they are kind of weak because they do not focus on any one aspect of gameplay. So because they're so versatile and they're pretty much generalists, they're not good at any one thing. For example, House Goliath gangs, for example, are known for their high resiliency and really good combat abilities. Van Star are really good with their technical abilities, powerful weapons, and shooting. And those gangs have, obvious strengths and obvious weaknesses. But for a House Orlock gang, because they don't do any one thing well, they're kind of lacking when it comes to the higher tier level things. And that's the reason why it's kind of a weakness for House Orlock. There are ways to work around that. For example, making sure that you engage your enemy with overwhelming numbers, for example, or having intersecting fields of fire, or getting better weapons and equipment. So there are workarounds around that versatility weakness. At the same time though, because they do have such powerful equipment and they have such powerful fighters, traditionally speaking, House Orlock gangs are usually smaller than other gangs, especially like against gangs like House Cawdor, for example. So because of that, they do have to worry about that as well. Now, this last bullet here about immature opponents with balance and power creep, you do have to worry about that as a House Orlock player. Since the Ash Waste rules have dropped, as I mentioned before, House Orlock is the only gang to have house-specific tactics as well as crew options in the Ash Waste. Unfortunately, some opponents out there that you'll face against who are a little bit more immature will also complain about that fact. They'll be like, oh, your gang's overpowered because they have that ability in the Ash Waste, while my gang doesn't, and they'll want to be immature about it. And it may sound ridiculous to bring this up as a weakness, but for example, my local gaming store, I was asked if I wanted to participate in an Ash Waste campaign. And I was actually quite interested in doing so until I saw the way the arbitrator was going to run it, as well as the other players. They weren't going to allow any Ash Waste nomads, Ironhead prospectors, or House Orlock. Anything but that. Because they said that those 3 gangs had an unfair advantage over the other gangs, as an example of what kind of nonsense you might meet up with. So my viewpoints on balance and power creep, so that's my opinion on that. And that could be a potential weakness you might fight against if you go with the groups who are immature that way. Alright, so now that we're done talking about the strengths and weaknesses of playing a House Orlock gang for the Ashways, let's go ahead and talk about your individual fighters. And the first fighter we're going to start with is the Orlock Road Captain, which is the leader of your gang. Now these fighters cost 105 credits and they have some pretty amazing stats. They have 5-inch movement, a 3+ weapon skill, 3+ ballistic skill. They also have 3 strength and toughness. All these are pretty good so far. But the thing that sets them off the most, however, is that they have 3 wounds. So far they're the only leader, I believe, besides the Ironhead Squat Prospector leader, that actually has 3 wounds. So this guy is very, very survivable. He's also got a 4+ initiative as well as 2 attacks, and their psychology stats are really good as well. They got 4+ for leadership, 5+ for cool, 5+ for willpower, as well as 5+ for intelligence. So let's go and talk about this fight a little bit more in detail. Now, besides their wonderful stats, they also have some access to pretty good skills. For their primary skills, they have ferocity as well as leadership, as well as savant. So savant's really good for this guy because they get those higher end tech skills. Their secondary skills are in brawn, as well as in shooting, as well as in bravado, which is the house-specific skill for this gang. Now, the Road Captain, in my opinion, is the best leader in terms of stats in the game so far. And the reason why that is the case is because they have that beautiful 3+ weapon skill and ballistic skill. So they're equally as good at shooting heavy weapons or special weapons or any kind of weapons you want, or at the same time pretty good in close combat as well. Usually unless you're playing a House Goliath gang, more often than not, you want to keep your leader out of close combat. And the reason why is because close combat weapons tend to be very powerful and very high damaging. At the same time, you're also putting your leader at risk as well. So a lot of players like to keep their leaders as a more supportive role, using their leadership skills as well as shooting weapons from a distance. The nice thing about a Road Captain is that you can actually go in close combat and still be confident they'll be able to survive it because they have those 3 wounds. And you got to give them the equipment, of course, in order to help them do that. Or you can actually have them take a leadership supporting role, or using heavy weapons, or however you want to. Like I said, a lot of fighters within the House Orlock are extremely versatile, so the captain is no exception. You can kit this person out to do any kind of job that you want as well. They could go from boarding actions on enemy vehicles to shooting heavy weapons and blowing up trucks. I mean, it's pretty much, open to whatever you want to do with these guys as well. So because of that, especially with the combination of all the equipment they can start off with, they have some really good access to some starting weapons that could really help them out as well. For example, you have a combo weapon where you could use a bolt gun with a melta-gun, and a melta-gun is going to be very, very powerful in order to take out enemy vehicles. You can equip this person with a plasma gun if you want to, or go with a heavy weapon like a heavy bolter, or whatever the case may be. They got access to power hammers, all sorts of different things. At the same time, they can also purchase Cybermastiffs, which will be really helpful as well to protecting your leader, and we'll talk about the Cybermastiff a little bit more in detail later on in this video. Alright, so up next we have the House Orlock Road Sergeant. This person costs 80 credits. They have a movement characteristics of 5 inches, 4+ for weapon skill, 3+ for ballistic skill. They got 3 strength, 3 toughness, 2 wounds. They have 4 initiative, 2 attacks. They also have 5 leadership, 6 cool, 6 willpower, as well as 6 intelligence. As well as for the skills that they could use, their primary skills are ferocity, as well as the house primary skill for this gang, bravado. They also have savant as well as brawn for their secondaries as well. So let's talk about this fight a little bit more in detail. So when it comes to the Road Sergeant, oddly enough, you want to keep your Road Sergeants with their heavy and special weapons. With that 3+ ballistic skill, that makes them very, very deadly with those kind of weapons, and that's the way you pretty much want to equip them as well. At the same time, ferocity skills really work excellent with this champion as well. Even if you don't want to use them as a long-range shooter, you want to use them for close combat, that ferocity skill is really going to help them. Especially Nerves of Steel. Nerves of Steel is probably the blue chip skill within the ferocity tree. And the reason why I say that is because your Road Sergeants will be carrying the heavy weapons as well as their special weapons. So because of that, your opponents are going to spend a lot of time trying to take down those Road Sergeants with long-range fire before they can use those weapons. And as anyone knows, if you get hit, if you don't get wounded, you get pinned. Well, the Nerves of Steel ability, you could take a cool test, and these guys have excellent cool stats, by the way. And if they pass it, they escape pinning automatically. So that's going to be a huge, huge bonus to putting that skill specifically on your Road Sergeants. At the same time, they also have access to big names as well, which is really going to help you out for your gang, in my opinion, as well. So you really want to focus on the ferocity skills with these Road Sergeants, as well as get a pretty good big name to help them make them more survivable. And we'll talk a little bit more detail about the big names later on in this video. Alright, so the next champion that we're talking about, which is specific to House Orlock, is the Arms Master. This is the second champion you can pick out. This person costs 95 credits, and let's talk about their stats real quick. So they have a 5-inch movement as well as 3+ for weapon skill as well as for ballistic skill. They have 3 strength, 3 toughness, 2 wounds, 4+ for initiative. They have 2 attacks. They have 5+ for leadership, 6+ for cool, 6+ for willpower, as well as 6+ for intelligence. Now, when it comes to their skills that they can choose from, their primary skills are ferocity as well as bravado, and we'll talk a little bit more about why bravado is the best skill to use for these guys. And then you also have brawn as well as savant as their secondary skills as well. So let's talk about these guys real quick. So when it comes to the Arms Master, the Arms Master actually makes excellent close quarters battle fighters. So you can put him in close to medium range combat. That 3+ weapon skill equipped with a good close combat weapon makes him pretty deadly as well. At the same time, because of the bravado skills, the shotgun savant skill, which is unique to the bravado skill tree, is a very powerful combination to use with an Arms Master. What the shotgun savant skill actually allows you to do is to take the short range bonuses you get for shooting a shotgun of any type and apply it to long range shots, which by itself is a pretty powerful ability. But at the same time, the scouter shot trait for a shotgun can also, when you roll for that, you roll 2d6, you pick the highest d6 result to see the 100 times that you actually wound your opponent. And this is what makes our Arms Master so good at close quarters combat. You give them a combat shotgun with all those advantages, and they're really good at tearing up with their opponents. At the same time, another reason why you want to take the Arms Master is because of the Rule of Iron special ability, which basically allows these guys, as the rules basically states, the idea is supposed to be that whenever a friendly Orlock fighter within 6 inches of the fighter is about to break, until the end of that round, that fighter gains the Nerves of Steel ability, especially if they manage to pass a cool test. And at the same time, they also subtract 2 from any result of a bottle test that a gang has to take, so long as the Arms Master is located inside of it. So these Arms Masters are going to make your fighters tougher, going to be making them a little bit more resilient. At the same time, it's also going to help you stick around longer in a battle, especially if you're trying to take casualties. Arms Master is an absolute must-have in a gang. Alright, so up next we have your Gunner, and your Gunners are just your typical ganger that you have within your Orlock gang. They cost about 45 credits. Here's their stats. They have 5-inch movement, 4+ weapon skill and ballista skill, 3 strength, 3 toughness, 1 wound, 4 initiative, 1 attack. They have 6 leadership, 7 cool, 7 willpower, as well as 7 intelligence. So these are your basic gangers that you usually put down in your gang as well. And they're very solid and they're extremely versatile. Because their stats are kind of like right in the middle of the road, you can kit them out for whatever job you need them to do. If you want them to use heavy firepower with bolt guns, you can equip them that way. If you want to use auto guns for make them a little bit cheaper, you could do that. If you want to equip them for close combat, that's also an option that you can use for these guys as well. At the same time, another really cool thing about House Orlock gunners, especially if you make them to a specialist, they're one of the few gangs that their specialists can take heavy weapons. In this case, you can either take a harpoon launcher, a heavy bolter, heavy stubber, or a heavy flamer. So because of that, these guys can also take heavy weapons as well. They also have access to really powerful special weapons like melta guns as well as plasma guns. So these guys are really excellent as well. So very, very versatile. Oh, and I forgot to mention, for their skills, their primary skills are brawn as well as ferocity, while combat as well as shooting are their secondaries. So these guys can do a whole lot of range of different things. They're good for close combat, good for shooting, and at the same time you pair them up with an Arms Master, you can give them temporarily Nerves of Steel ability, makes them very, very survivable, especially in a game. So Gunners, really excellent gangers. Alright, so the next fighter we're going to talk about real quick is the House Orlock Wrecker, which is the prospect level fighter that's in this gang, and in my opinion is probably the best fighter that's available to an Orlock gang. Now, your Wrecker costs 55 credits, and here's their stats. They have a 6-inch movement as well as a 5+ weapon skill. They have a 4+ ballista skill, 3 strength, 3 toughness, 1 wound, 3+ initiative, 1 attack. They also have 9+ leadership, 8+ cool, 8+ willpower, and 8+ intelligence. Now when it comes to the skills they have access to, their primary skill is in shooting, so that's going to make them really good at doing fast shot as well as twin guns and gunfighter, those kind of skills. At the same time, they also have combat as savant for their secondaries. Now let's go ahead and talk about these guys a little bit more in detail. So when it comes to the prospect, the reason why I feel that the prospect is perhaps the best fighter in the gang is for a couple of reasons. One of the biggest things about them is that they have a 4+ ballista skill, and plus they have access to those shooting skills I had mentioned earlier. At the same time, especially in a Ashways campaign, the best thing about a Wrecker is they have jump boosters. Now jump boosters, what they do is they actually manage to give additional D3 inches for movement for Wreckers. So this is with their normal movements as well as for when they charge into combat as well. If you do manage to get a Grease Monkey in your gang, which is a hanger-on, you can actually supercharge these jump boosters to give you D6 inch extra movement. So these guys are very, very fast. At the same time, when they charge into close combat with those jump boosters, they also get a +1 strength bonus to their close combat attacks as well. And that's the reason why I feel that the Orlock Wrecker is such a good fighter, especially in the Ashways campaign, And the reason why is because these characters are basically mounted on vehicles without actually have to suffer the mounted condition, so they can still climb around in ruins, they can still get objectives, that sort of thing as well. So wreckers are very good that way. Now, the only downside to wrecker is that their weapon choices are kind of limited. They're pretty much limited to pistols, close combat weapons, as well as Sawn-Off shotguns for their basic weapons. And so because of their higher ballista skill, they don't really have much good weapon choices because of their 5+ weapon skill, if that makes sense. And that's the reason why. So one of the things I like to equip these guys with is probably give them twin pistols, so that way they can use them both in close combat as well as shooting. At the same time, they get 2 shots when they go in with their pistols. Things like can flamers, for example, are really good for these guys, same thing with plasma pistols. But the only problem is that those, of course, cost a lot of points. So that's the thing to keep in mind when it comes to your wreckers. And like I said before, that's one of the reasons why I feel that they're one of the best fighters available to an Orlock gang. So the next fighter we're going to talk about real quick is the Greenhorn, which is the juvie level fighter that's available to House Orlock gangs. These guys cost 35 credits apiece. They have a movement characteristic of 6 inches. They have 5+ weapon skill, 5+ ballista skill. They have 3 strength, 3 toughness, as well as 1 wound. They have a 3+ initiative, 1 attack, 7 leadership, 8 cool, 8 willpower, as well as 8 intelligence. And when it comes to their skills, their primary skill is ferocity, followed by agility, as well as brawn for their secondary choices. So when it comes to a juvie level, the Greenhorns for their gang, the nice thing about Greenhorns is that they're very, very cheap and they're also very expendable. And the best way to use a Greenhorn is to keep them that way. Keep them very bare bones, just equip them the bare minimum amount of weapons just to get the job done. Don't worry about spending points on credits on actually getting them armor, because if they die, you can easily replace them, in my opinion, so you don't really need to worry about that. Now, as the Greenhorn develops over time, if they start gaining experience and such, then at that point, invest in better weapons like Sawn-Off shotguns and chain swords. Weapons like that. Give them demo charges and blasting charges, maybe give them mesh armor if they actually start surviving and things of that nature. Now, traditionally speaking, when you're originally fighting in the Underhive, the best way to use juvie level fighters was to use them as human shields to protect your more valuable fighters. In the Ash Wastes, probably the best way to use these guys now that we're in the Ash Wastes is to actually use them for boarding actions, to board enemy vehicles. Because you have to take an initiative test in order to board your enemy vehicle, and these guys have initiative 3+. So they're perfectly designed for that kind of thing. Just send them in mobs that jump over the enemy vehicles, kind of like the war boys from Mad Max Fury Road. And that'll probably be the best way to use your Greenhorns, actually. Keep them cheap and expendable. If they manage to survive and gain experience and become good fighters, then shell out the additional funds in order to make them more survivable and make them more deadly. Now, another new addition that's to a gang of House Orlock gang, especially the Ash Wastes, are now that House Orlock is the only gang so far that has house-specific crew to operate their vehicles. These guys are called Iron Riders, and they cost 35 credits apiece. So let's talk about the crew characteristics real quick. Now, the vehicle characteristics will depend on what vehicle you put them in, but for their crew characteristics, they basically have 4+ ballista skill, 6+ leadership, 6+ cool, 7+ willpower, as well as 7+ intelligence as well. And at the same time, when it comes to their skill access, they have shooting as their primary, followed by the new driving skill that's available now. At the same time, their secondary is Savant. And of course, their weapons list, their equipment list is quite limited, which also makes sense because, these are vehicle crew members, so that's the reason why they're kind of limited that way. Now, when it comes to these guys, they're the only, like I said before, they're the only house-specific vehicle crew so far, which makes them really cool. And because of that, they also have house-specific crew tactic cards. So the only gang so far that actually has tactic cards associated with them. Now, if you're in a campaign where your players do use tactic cards, this could give you a huge advantage over your opponents because your drivers are the only ones that do have tactics cards. If you play a campaign or with an arbitrator who doesn't use tactic cards, then this is a moot point. But like I said before, if you do play in a situation where you use tactic cards, you do have some specific tactics that can help out your gang, and that's what makes Iron Riders so cool. At the same time, they also have really good psychology stats for their points. They only cost 35 credits in order to hire these guys, operate your vehicles. At the same time, they also have the house-specific vehicle with the Outrider quads, and these are the guys you would actually use in order to operate those vehicles if you decide to use those vehicles or any vehicles at all in your Ash Wastes campaign. Now, the next fighter we're going to talk about is your Cybermaster. Now, this is an exotic beast, but you can purchase these for your champions as well as for your leader gang. And so let's go and talk about them a little bit more because they do actually play a very important role within your Orlock gang. Now, these guys cost 100 credits apiece, so you're probably not going to be hiring these right off the bat, but let's go and talk about their stats real quick. They have 5-inch movement as well as 3+ weapon skill. They have no ballista skill whatsoever. They have 3 strength, 3 toughness, 1 wound, 4 initiative, 1 attack. They have 7 leadership, 6 cool, 8 willpower, as well as 8 intelligence. Now, the reason why you want to take Cybermaster are a couple of reasons. One of the big ones, of course, they have Watchdog ability, which gives them that +1 for modifier for when they act as sentries. Your Cybermasters automatically become Watchdog, automatically become sentries in your gangs to give you a little bit of bonus there. So that's one nice thing about that. At the same time, so long as they're within 3 inches of the fighter they're with, your fighter cannot be subject to a coup de grace, which is actually really cool. At the same time, they can also assist you in close combat, and they can also be used as human shields to be used to protect your fighters with target ring priority. So that's a nice thing about these guys as well. At the same time, they also have access to skills that they become specialists. They have primary skill is combat, their secondary skill is ferocity. So, like I said before, you're probably not going to buy these guys right off the bat because for 100 credits, they're quite expensive for a starting gang, but it's worth mentioning because they do make excellent bodyguards to use as living shields to protect your leaders, as well as your champions. They also provide hindrance as well as assistance in close combat, which cannot be overly stated how important that could possibly be in close combat. But like I said, they're too expensive up front, but I suggest as the campaign develops, you go ahead and buy the maximum amount of Cybermasters that you can. They pair very, very well with Arms Masters because Arms Masters use combat shotguns. They may kind of get that CQB down. They do really, really well there. At the same time, they also make really useful bodyguards for your leaders as well, in my opinion, both in close combat support as well as protecting them from being taken out with a coup de grace. So that's the reason why I highly suggest you, consider taking Cybermasters, especially in your games of Ashway's campaign. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about, of course, are big names. Big names are the unique game mechanic that's available for House Orlock gangs, same way as like the gene smithing for House Goliath, for example, or the alchemy for Escher gangs. The big names game mechanic was actually brought in for the Orlock gangs, and it's actually kind of cool. They actually have some pretty cool things about them going on. Specifically, leaders and champions within your gang can take these right off the bat at the beginning of gang creation. And the nice thing about that is that it doesn't interfere with their skills. They still get their starting skill, and they also get a big name as well. Now, as a campaign develops, you can spend experience points to get those big names if you want to. However, though, I wouldn't recommend it. And the reason why that is the case is because these big names, while they do offer positive benefits to your fighters, they also sometimes come with some pretty substantial negative benefits, negative effects as well. It's kind of like a give and take in that situation. So because of that, when you choose big names, I suggest you choose wisely before you just kind of, go off and get those. And the reason why I say that is because when you get 6 experience points, you could use that to either get a random primary skill or a big name or increase a stat of some sort. Increasing a stat or getting a random primary skill are much more useful to your gang than a big name will be. And so that's why I believe that you should only take these big names at the beginning of a campaign. That way you get them right off the bat, and then you can use them for your champions and for your leaders. And that's what I pretty much believe in. Your big names actually come in 3 different flavors. You have Unbelievable Escapes, which makes your fighters more resilient. You have Impressive Leadership, which usually affects game mechanics in the campaign or psychological stats. And you have Improbable Beatdowns, which are really good for you taking out your opponents. And we're actually going to talk about a couple of them on the next couple of slides. I didn't talk about this too much in my very first starting rosters build video because I felt that they were not really all that great to use in a gang, but looking back now and starting to go over it and realizing I'm going to be playing a House Orlock gang in my Ashways campaign, I found some pretty useful ones, and we're going to talk about the ones that proved to be the most useful, but in my opinion, for your gangs in the Ash Wastes. Alright, so first of all, we're going to talk about Unbelievable Escape big names. And these ones are actually big names that are designed to actually help you to survive getting hurt, getting injured, that sort of thing. And there's actually 2 really important big names that I believe are actually worth getting for your gang. The first one's called Bullet Dodger. So how the Bullet Dodger skill big name basically works is that once per battle, when an enemy fighter makes a ranged attack against your fighter with this big name, you can force that enemy fighter to re-roll any successful hit rolls that are made against them, alright, for that range combat. And what that basically means is that for their next activation, however, though, this is where the negative comes back in. During their fighter's next activation, after this ability has been used, they can only make a simple move action. That's the only thing that they can do, and that's the negative in that aspect. Bullet Dodger, in my opinion, is really good for champions armed with heavy and special weapons. And the reason why is because it kind of just gives them one additional thing that makes them a little bit more survivable. Granted, you only use it once per battle, but the negative for it, which means you can only move, that's a very minimal drawback to that big name compared to some of the other ones that are available out there. So that's the reason why I think Bullet Dodger is a pretty good one to use, especially for champions who are armed with heavy weapons as well as special weapons. Now, another one that's really important too, especially since you're now going into the Ash Waste, is what's called Bad Zone Legend. And the rule states for this one, the fighter can make a special 3+ save roll against any damage sustained as a result of any environmental hazard. However, and here's where the negative comes in. During this fighter's next activation after this ability has been used, they cannot initiate or take part in group activations. Now, this one is actually kind of nice, and the reason why I would say this is a good one is because with the Ash Wastes, because there are now so many environmental factors that take place on battlefield conditions, as well as what season you're fighting in the campaign, whether you're fighting in the Season of Ash or the Season of Flame, there's a lot of hazards that are now environmental effects taking place on the battlefields in the Ash Wastes. So having this big name could be pretty good because you get a 3-up save against any environmental effect, which is really nice. And the only thing you can't do, of course, is be part of or do a group activation. And let's face it, some of these environmental effects can be pretty bad, so having that with that minimal negative effect is pretty good. So these are the two I would recommend. So if you're looking for a big name to make your fighters a little bit more survivable for your leaders and your champions, you're looking for some ones to use when you first create your gang, these would probably be one of the two I would actually use, would be Bullet Dodger or Bad Zone Legend. Alright, so the next set of big names are known as impressive leadership big names, and these are things that are going to be able to help out your leadership characteristics or with psychological stats, or to help you out as the campaign progresses as well. And just like all the other big names, for every positive you have, you also have some negatives as well. And so within the impressive leadership big name category, I believe there's two big names that pretty much are the better ones to use for your campaign. Now the first one is called Too Pretty for Primus. Now this one in my opinion is probably the best one. It says if this fighter is still on the battlefield at the end of a battle, their gang adds 2d6 times 5 credits to their stash. So that's the positive. So you can get anywhere between, what is it, up to 60 credits extra added to your stash, all the way down to 10 credits. But you know, in a campaign, the more credits you can get, always the better. Now here's where the negative comes in. The negative basically states, however, if a double is rolled, these credits are then added to your opponent's stash instead. So that's the negative on that one. Now, to be perfectly honest, I ran the odds on this. You actually only have a 1 in 6 chance of actually making that condition when rolling doubles. So once out of every 6 battle reports, that's not bad. And that's a lot of additional credits you can actually use for your gang. In fact, the average for that would be around 35 credits per game. That's because you usually roll a 7 more often than not when you're rolling 2d6. So 35 credits over 5 each battle report, up to 5 battle reports each time. That's not bad odds. And extra credits are always good to have a good thing as well. Now another one that's really cool is another one I like in the impressive leadership clearly is called Iron Stare. So this is the rule for Iron Stare. Iron Stare states that enemy fighters wishing to target this fighter with a ranged attack must first pass a cool test to see if the fighter is in line, like the cool check, if this fighter is in line of sight of the enemy fighter. So that's the nice thing about that. So because of that, that's one additional thing that's going to help your guys survive just a little bit longer. Really good to use for champions, especially if they're armed with special weapons or heavy weapons as well. It's just another added benefit to keep them alive as well. So now here's where the negative comes in. It says, in addition, this fighter never counts as the closest fighter to the pursuit of target priority. So that's also another cool thing about this as well. So the negative on this one is actually not that bad, especially since if you're set up putting your champions up in the front, this would be a really good one to use, especially if you have an arms master, for example, because that guy's always going to be in close combat. So a really excellent big names for that one. I suggest using Too Pretty for Primus for your leaders and using Iron Stare for your champions, in my opinion, because I feel that those are the ones that can give you the most benefit in an Ash Waste campaign. Now the last category of big names is called Improbable Beatdowns, and these are actually attacks that your fighters can use against their enemies and actually get a better result as a response for that. So when it comes to Improbable Beatdowns, in my opinion, you have two of these big names that really help out. One's called Bullet Lord, and what that basically means is that if you ever use a rapid fire weapon, you automatically get 3 shots. Alright, so that's the benefit of that one. So that one is really awesome. So as it says here, it says once per battle, rather than rolling the firepower dice, this fighter can choose the result of the dice to be a 3. So that's a positive. So if you've got a heavy bolter, heavy stubber, or any weapon that you want to use rapid fire to use that with, that's really going to help you out as well. Now there is a negative for this, and here's where the negative comes in. The negative one says, however, after working out the effects of the attack, the fighter's weapon counts as having failed an ammo check. So that's where the problem comes in, that's where the negative comes in. Now, the nice thing about that one, in my opinion, while it may be bad on the surface to automatically fail the ammo check, if you're using a rapid fire weapon that has a 4-up armor check, ammo check, you can easily reload that weapon. Now, if you have weapons, of course, that have scarcity traits or have a 6+ ammo check, things of that nature, it's not that bad a skill, not that bad of a negative, especially if you have a weapon stash on board your vehicle, or if someone in your gang has a munitioneer skill, or if you have an ammo cache, or if you have an ammo jack. So there's a lot of ways to mitigate the negative on Bullet Lords. So if you're looking for a way to really cause some damage to your opponent, that'd be a really good way to do so. So things like plasma guns, for example, stuff like that, that could really help you out in order to cause a lot of damage to your enemy. Another one that's a really cool one in my opinion is called Two Guns, and the rules for this one states when this fighter uses the Twin Guns Blazing rule, after working out the effects of their attack, every enemy fighter within 6 inches must make a nerf test. So that part's kind of cool. It's supposed to be like you're like this really cool gunslinger that just really impress everybody with your Twin Guns Blazing ability. Now here's what the negative says. The negative says, however, during any round in which the fighter uses the Twin Gun Blazing rule, they cannot make or participate in a group activation. So while that might be kind of bad, it's not that bad. It's minimal penalty. It's excellent for using in boarding actions in my opinion. So for example, let's say you have a champion who goes on board, pulls out twin hand flamers and shoots them both, and makes guys panic off the vehicle when you're boarding an enemy vehicle. That's perfectly fine because yes, they might not be able to participate in a group activation or start one anyways, but that's not so bad, especially with the effects that you get for this one as well. So like I said, when it comes to your big names, I suggest you get them for your fighters at the beginning of the campaign, but don't waste any experience points getting them, unless of course you really want them in my opinion. So now that we're done talking about the big names, let's go ahead and talk about our 3 starting lists to use for Orlocks in your Ash Waste campaign. Alright, so the very first of the Ash Waste build list that I would have for Orlock Gangs is what I like to call the Cautious Standard build. This is going to cost you around 1,400 points in order to build this list, and the only thing you need to do in order to build this list is to have either the starting box for Ash Waste with the Orlock Gang in it, or you either buy a box of Orlock Gang as well as a box of Outrider quads. So let's go and talk about this real quick. So your leader will be a road captain. This character is going to cost 180 credits. They're equipped with mesh armor, Sawn-Off shotgun, Servo claw, as well as a Respirator, as well as a commanding presence ability, and they have the 2 pretty for Hive Primus big name. You also have 2 road sergeants in this gang. Road sergeant number 1 is going to cost you 225 credits. This fighter is equipped with mesh armor, a harpoon launcher, stub gun, as well as a Respirator. They have nerves of steel skill, as well as the Iron Stare big name. And then you have Road Sergeant number 2, so it costs 245 credits for this fighter. It's got mesh armor, a heavy stubber, stub gun, a Respirator, nerves of steel, as well as Iron Stare big name. After that, you will have 4 gunners. Gunners 1 and 2 will be equipped exactly the same with shotguns, with solid and scatter shot, with stub guns, as well as Respirators, and they will cost you 95 credits apiece. Gunner number 3 will have a Respirator and a Specialist skill. They'll cost you 60 credits, and gunner number 4 will have an auto gun, a stub gun, as well as a Respirator, and they will cost you 80 credits as well. And then after that, you'll have 2 Iron Riders. Iron Rider number 1 will cost you 290 credits. This person's equipped with Respirator as well as an Outrider quad with a heavy bolter mounted on the back. And they have Iron Rider number 2, who costs you 130 credits. They have a Respirator as well as an Outrider quad. And like I said, all you need to build this list is either the Ash Waste starter box that comes with all the Orlock Gang members, or you buy a box of Orlock fighters and a box of Outrider quads. It's a pretty decent list that allows you to use all the features of Orlock Gang in the Ash Waste with plenty of room to customize and to grow as your campaign develops. And the best part about this is all the materials you need to build this list come with those box sets. You don't need to buy anything extra, upgrading lists or anything like that, upgrading boxes or anything like that. So that's a nice thing about that. Also very cost effective as well. Now, this list, I call it the cautious list, and the reason why is because this list is very cautious, with every gang member wearing respirators to mitigate any environmental effects as well as battlefield conditions in the Ash Wastes. Now, the reason why that's the case is because depending on what season you're playing in, and as well as what are you playing in the near, far, or wild wastes, it could depend on what kind of battlefield conditions can vary wildly. And that's the reason why you have respirators, because you do have some of those situations where if you're not wearing a respirator, it can cause you a lot of problems. Now, equipping every fighter with a respirator may seem overly cautious, but in my opinion, Ash Waste nomads automatically come with respirators, so if they're doing that, you should probably do the same thing too, just in case, because environmental effects do play a huge role now in the campaign as well. Now, this list consists of 2 fire teams. You have 1 support fire team as well as 1 assault fire team. Your support fire team will consist of your Road Sergeant number 1 and Road Sergeant number 2. They use their heavy weapons to suppress and engage the enemy at a distance. Meanwhile, Iron Rider number 1 as well as Gunner number 2 uses the Outrider's quad's heavy bolter to move quickly and to engage enemies at a distance and lay down that suppressive fire with that heavy bolter. Now, your assault team consists of your Road Captain as well as Gunner gunner number 1 and gunner number 2, their job is to flank the enemy and engage the enemy in close quarters combat. Meanwhile, Iron Rider 2 and gunner number 4 move in and engage the enemy in close quarters combat as well. Yes, your gunner only has an auto rifle, auto gun to start off with, but when you get enough credits, purchase another heavy weapon for the Iron Rider number 2 as well. And this is what I like to call the overly cautious starting list standard build for your Ash Waste campaign for House Orlock. Now, on the flip side of that, I have what I like to call the Reckless standard build, and this one costs you 1,395 credits to build up this list, so let's go ahead and talk about it. It's actually very similar to the verse list I just gave. So you have your Road Captain. He's going to cost you 165 credits. This person's got Mesh Armor, Sawn-Off Shotgun, as well as a Servo Claw. They have Commanding Presence, and once again, the Too Pretty for Primus big name. Then you have 2 Road Sergeants. Road Sergeant number 1 costs you 210 credits. They're armed with Mesh Armor, Harpoon Launcher, Stub Gun. They also have the Nerves of Steel skill, as well as the Iron Stare big name. And Road Sergeant number 2 is going to cost 230 credits. This person's got Mesh Armor, Heavy Stubber, as well as a Stub Gun. They also have the Nerves of Steel, as well as the Iron Stare big name. Now then, you have 2 Gunners. Gunners number 1 and 2 will cost you exactly the same because they're equipped exactly the same. Gunner 1 and 2 will cost you 75 credits apiece. They're armed with shotguns with solid and scatter shot. The Gunner number 3 will cost you 45 credits because this person's got the Specialist ability. And then Gunner number 4 is going to cost you 45 credits because that person has nothing. The reason why these 2 Gunners are not equipped with anything is because they'll be using the heavy bolters on the Outrider quads that you have for this gang. You have 2 Iron Riders. Both of them will cost you 275 credits apiece. Both of them are mounted on Iron Rider quads, and both will be using heavy bolters. Now, all you need for this build, like the previous list, is either the Ash Waste starter box set or a box of Orlocks, as well as a box of Outrider quads. It's a decent list, just like the previous one, that allows you to use all the features of Orlock Gang in the Ash Waste, and with plenty of room to customize and to grow as your campaign progresses. And the nice thing about this one, like I said, it's also the most cost-effective list because all you need is that starter box set or a box of Orlock fighters and an Outrider box. Now, I call this a Reckless list because you don't have any respirators at all for environmental effects and battlefield conditions, so you are at the mercy of the environments that you fight in. However, because you don't have those things, you have a lot more killing power in this list. Now, once again, this consists of 2 fire teams. You have 1 support fire team and 1 assault fire team. Your support fire team consists of Road Sergeant number 2, Gunners 3 and 4, as well as Iron Rider 1 and 2. The Road Sergeant uses their Heavy Stubber to lay down suppressive fire and engage the enemy at distance, while Iron Rider number 1 and Gunner number 3 operate 1 Outrider quad, and they work together to use the Heavy Bolter to move around in the battlefield, suppressing enemies at a distance. Same thing with Iron Rider number 2 and Gunner number 4. They do exactly the same thing. They both operate the Outrider quad with a Heavy Bolter, and they shoot your enemies at a distance as well. Make sure that your 2 Outrider quads have intersecting fields of fire to maximize your kill, which means that both these guys are shooting at similar targets in the same area, so that way you get double your chances of causing wounds. And that makes up your support fire team. Now, your assault fire team consists of your Road Captain, as well as Road Sergeant number 1, as well as Gunner number 1 and Gunner number 2. The assault fire team flanks your enemy and engages them in close quarters combat, and assaulting through and killing your enemies in close combat. The assault team mops up any survivors that the support team doesn't kill outright. The Harpoon Launcher is kind of nice because you're able to fire that pretty easily, especially if you manage to get a suspensor for it, so that part's kind of nice too. At the same time, the Road Captain's got that Servo Claw to help them in close combat, Sawn-Off Shotgun to take out enemies in close combat, and same thing with shotguns as well. Clearly, as you guys can see from this list, as the campaign develops, you will buy better weapons and equipment later on, but for now, this is the what I like to call the Reckless starter list. Alright, so the very last list, I like to call this Sump Dogs, House Orlock Outcast Gang. So yes, this is an Orlock gang, but not really, because it's an Outcast gang that uses Orlock rules for that. And these guys are modeled after the Sump Dogs, which is the gang that is led by Slate Murdena, which is the special character bounty hunter that you talked about in the gang books. Now, for those of you guys who are not aware, Slate Murdena is actually where a lot of the lore for the Ash Waste come from. Slate Murdena is what's known as a road boss. He's basically a free agent that works for House Orlock, who enforces the highways and byways of the Ash Waste and actually comes into High Primus sometimes to do the work for them. And so that to get that character as your leader, I use that for in order to make an outcast gang. So your leader for this gang is going to be Slate Murdena, the special character bounty hunter. It's going to cost you 360 credits. He's got the survivor archetype because it matches them narratively. He's armed with mesh armor, a custom plasma pistol, a power hammer, as well as frag grenades. He's got photo goggles, Macula, the Cybermaster, as well as fearsome skill, iron will, as well as nerves of steel. You also come with Macula, which is a Cybermaster, which is absolutely free. Who's also got Savage Bite, Combat Master, as well as Loyal Protector and Watchdog skill. After that, you will have 2 Outcast champions. Champion number 1 is going to cost you 180 credits. This person's got Gunslinger archetype. They got Mesh armor as well as a plasma gun, a stub gun, as well as a fast shot ability. And Outcast champion number 2 comes with 85 credits. They got the Gunslinger archetype. They have Mesh armor and a stub gun and a fast shot ability because they'll be using weapons on the Cargo 8 Ridge Hauler that you have in this gang. Now afterwards, you have 2 Outcast Hive Scum. Scum number 1 and 2, both of them will cost you 90 credits apiece. Both are armed with bolt guns as well as stub guns. And then you guys have Hive Scum number 3 and 4. They're going to cost you 90 credits apiece as well. And they're both equipped exactly the same, both having combat shotguns as well as stub guns. Now for your vehicle in this one, you're going to recruit a Guild of Coin Hauler, who's going to be the crew for your gang. He's going to cost you 415 credits. This guy will be operating a Cargo 8 Ridge Hauler with a Munitorium armored container, grenade launcher with frag and crack grenades, tire claws for improved handling, as well as headlights. Now, this one will be one of the most expensive lists due to the miniatures you have to buy. If you want to make your army WYSIWYG, which stands for what you see is what you get, you do have to spend things like buying a Cargo 8 Ridge Hauler and things of that nature. But if you're willing to proxy, then this list can be a lot of fun and also still be cheap at the same time. It brings a good balance between what a House Orlock gang and an Outcast gang can do. I made an Outcast gang so that way you can get Slate Moderna to be the leader of your gang. And that's the reason why I made an Outcast gang. At the same time, that Cargo 8 Ridge Hauler with its Munitorium armored container helps the gang with its ammo rolls. So you do have a lot of bolt guns in this gang, but if you should get that ammo roll, it's no biggie, no harm, because the Munitorium container is an ammo cache that never runs out. So you can use that to get your really high powerful weapons in this gang. At the same time, the Ridge Hauler also generates additional income for the gang because you can get, I believe it's D3 times 10 credits if you manage to get the vehicle off the battlefield without it being wrecked. So that's really going to help you as well. Now this list consists of 2 fire teams. It consists of a support fire team and an assault fire team. Your support fire team will consist of your champion number 1, champion number 2, Outcast Scum number 1, Outcast Scum number 2, as well as the Guild of Coin Hauler with the Cargo 8 Ridge Hauler. Champion number 1 spams the fast shot ability with their plasma gun, laying down destructive fire upon enemies. And the same applies for Outcast Scum number 1 and 2, using their bolt guns to do exactly the same thing. Now the Munitorium armored container will help with any ammo rolls that your fighters might have to make. At the same time, champion number 2 uses the Ridge Hauler's grenade launcher, using that fast shot ability to fire frag as well as crack grenades as you need to, using that fast shot ability. So there's a lot of firepower coming out of that one vehicle alone, and also helping out your fighters with any ammo checks that you might need to take as well. Now your assault team will consist of Slate Moderna, Macula, as well as Outcast Scum number 3 and Outcast Scum number 4. These fighters can board enemy vehicles and be very, very deadly that way. They can dismount and fight on the ground, extremely deadly that way as well, or they can stay on board your Cargo 8 Ridge Hauler and defend it from enemy borders. Slate Moderna is a beast at close combat who's almost unkillable with a lot of the special rules that he has, and the combat shotguns wielded by Scum number 3 and 4 will definitely help out as well. So you may not be able to get access to other fighters like Wreckers and such from your Orlock lists because of an Outcast gang, but at the same time though, you can get Slate Moderna, which is actually kind of cool. Alright you guys, so there you have it. That is my starting rosters for taking out House Orlock gangs into the Ashways of Necromunda. So in conclusion, this is an excellent gang to explore and to fight in the Ashways. Narratively as well as aesthetically, it matches the setting as well as the campaign setting. Narratively, because House Orlock, according to the lore, patrol the highways of the Ashways to make sure commerce goes everywhere it needs to go to. That's what they're known for. Aesthetically, they look like Mad Max guys from the Mad Max films, so they look really, really cool. They got tools and stuff like that, and chains and things. They look like what mechanics with guns, so it works out perfectly for these guys as well. So because of that, it makes them really, really awesome. Plus, they have house-specific crew and tactics right off the bat, so it's really going to give you an edge in combat as well. The only thing you do have to worry about, of course, is the quote-unquote bandwagon, balance bandwagon. You do have to worry about those guys because, you know, they're going to complain that no fair, overpowered, you know, all that kind of nonsense. But that's okay, though, because just like a true Orlock ganger, drinking the bitter tears of your enemy's defeat is the sweetest beverage of all. So there you guys have it. That's my take on this one. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is invaluable to us as always. Also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all the latest greatest hobby news related to this channel. That's going to do it for this one, you guys. We will catch you guys next one. Peace out and stay classy.